So this is really strange to be on that writer's retreat for 2 weeks and not even know what day it was. It was just a dream, and I'm encouraging Annie Laurie to take it too. There's a couple in Point Reyes Station who've been longtime members of the foundation. Richard Kirschman was his name, and he endowed a free thought fellowship to this retreat. So Rob Boston of Americans United, he took at that. And what's his name? Fidalgo with CFI, he took the retreat 1 year. And so some pretty big name authors and writers in that have been at this thing. It's really kind of peaceful and picturesque right over the water. And about half of my work there was reading the other side, reading what the religious people say about worship. John MacArthur is one of those, and there's a whole bunch of people. So you have to do that. If you're going to write about something, you need to know the other side. You've heard of the phrase straw man, like a straw man argument? This is where you set up a phony argument and then you knock it down. Well, there's also an argument called the steel man argument, which is, or I guess steel woman, steel person, whatever. The steel man argument is where you make really sure that you are adequately representing the other person's point of view. And you say, here's what I understand your argument and your point of view is, and let me express it to you, and then you tell me if I'm expressing your argument correctly before we even proceed. And that way you know you're on the same page. It's like the opposite of a straw man. So this book about worship that I'm working on, I don't want to just go shooting off my opinion like here's what I think. I want to know what they are saying and what does the Bible actually say and what's behind all of that. Well, you don't have to be an expert to notice that all the experts disagree with each other anyway, so it's kind of tough. That happened with my book about free will, which came out a couple years ago. And when I wrote the book about free will, Annie Laurie thought, why are you writing about that? Who cares about free will? Well, some people don't. I mean, some people do. But I told her, well, I had no choice but to write the book. So anyway, it's really exciting to be internally motivated to do something like that. You've all had that happen in your own lives, I'm sure. There's something that gets you out of bed in the morning because it's so exciting you want to just do that. Well, for me, it's writing and music, writing and jazz music. It's been 2 weeks since I've touched the piano. Today's the first time, so that was kind of fun. And I'm playing a gig Saturday night in Madison with the jazz combo. And I told them the first couple tunes are going to be kind of rusty, but we'll be back in on it. And then in order to go on a 2-week retreat like this, you can't just leave. You have to do all the prep work so that you can be gone. You know, when you go on a vacation, just to get ready to go on the vacation and make sure that those things are covered. So these 2 radio shows that Annie Laurie has done this last 2 weeks, she looks really good on them. Well, because I did all this work in advance. So if you think it was a good show, tell Annie Laurie it was a great show. But basically, and she interviewed last week. She interviewed Megan Phelps Roper, who's the granddaughter in the Fred Phelps family. You know, the Westboro Baptist Church. She just wrote a book called Unfollow, which is a wonderful book. Her uncle, Nate Phelps, came out years ago, and she actually hadn't even met him. He left years ago. But she tells the story of the whole thing, the protesting. You know, they protest the gay funerals with God hates fags, all that stuff. So now she's out, and she tells her whole story about being out. So I read her whole book and took notes and very carefully made up a bunch of talking points. And Annie Laurie has not read the book, but she was able to go on the radio show and say, so you said on page 42, like she really knew the whole thing, right? So, because you have to do that. You can't just say, oh, you wrote a book, duh, what's it about? So then we have it every week, you know. It's like one of these things, I'm so glad this is done. Well, then there's next week, and then there's next week, and next week, so. And we've had you on, haven't we, Judy? You've been on our show once or twice, years ago, maybe? Radio, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they happened to come up during the Christmas, and all the media was asking you, why did...
We were the 3rd most reported news story nationally that day when we broke news.
Yeah.
Haven't even put up the billboards yet. The third most reported story.
Yeah, and all the media was thinking you did it on purpose that week because you were, sticking it to Christmas. It just so happened that was the week that we could get the. Did any of you see those billboards? That's part of what we do in the foundation. Is we had the very first roadside full-size billboard in the country for atheism and free thought. It was called "Beware of Dogma." That was in 2007, and since then hundreds. We once had more than 50 in Atlanta, and sometimes you can get a good deal on billboards, outdoor advertising, if they're hungry or if they have remnants. So we were able to get a really good, in fact, the billboard company told us not to say how much they were charging because they didn't want to undercut others. But we got a real good deal on like 50 or 60 billboards. But half of them were kind of in lousy places, like on the side of a garage or something. But a lot of them were really good. So we have in South Dakota, the In God We Trust in the public schools, and in is it Ohio? I think it's Ohio. In God We Trust in the schools, and the editorial cartoonist Steve Benson, who is working for us a lot more now. Do you know Steve Benson? He used to work at the Arizona Republic. He's a former Mormon. He's the grandson of Ezra Taft Mormon, who was a president of the Mormon Church. Are there any former Mormons here? So you know who he was. Ezra Taft Benson used to be the Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower. And there's a photograph of Steve Benson in the White House as a baby. And he says, "I'm the other bald guy in the picture with Eisenhower." But anyway, Steve's been drawing cartoons for us, and so he drew some really good cartoons that are on billboards now. The one in South Dakota was, there's this person engraving at the bottom of Mount Rushmore, "In God We Trust." And the four presidents are looking down going, "There goes the neighborhood." So, and that was on a billboard and on the highway. So. And then in Ohio, it was a teacher on the blackboard. In God we trust. Except for the word God, it was like Shiva, Vishnu, Allah, Yahweh, none of the above. It was just a long list of which God are you going to put? Are you going to tell the kids to believe in God? So that's on a billboard going up. We just had so we take legal work. We have a team of, right now we have 8 full-time attorneys plus 2 fellowships. So there's 10 full-time attorneys in the office working very hard, and they can't get the work done because people like you are contacting us. Who was it that just told me today that they contacted us about an issue in the schools? And it's fascinating to sit in on the legal meetings each week with the 10 attorneys and the legal staff, and Annie Laurie and I discussing issues and strategies. And we told our attorneys from the very beginning, you are hired for non-litigation. You're hired basically to write letters to try to correct problems without going to court, because court's expensive and time-consuming. So we've had 3,000 or 4,000 complaints every year that come into the office, and we send out more than 1,000 letters, not counting follow-up letters. And just from those non-litigation complaints, we've had 200 or 300 clear victories alone, just from that, which is pretty amazing. Any one of those could have been a lawsuit, but didn't have to be because the law is strong. And so our team has template letters that are pretty much ready to go because these issues have happened so often that some student will call and say, "Help, they're praying at my graduation next Tuesday." Well, we can get a letter out right now, like within an hour or two. We can get a letter to the school, we can get that, and we can sometimes get it stopped immediately. So schools, by the way, take priority when there's a school complaint, and schools tend to be it tends to be the biggest area of complaint for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, with the religion in the schools. So it's really fun, but even though they're hired to be non-litigation, they're attorneys, so they want to sue. There's a question back here.
What about prayers at presidential inauguration?
Yeah, so yeah, we've complained about that. And, you know, Rick Warren did the prayers once. He did one for Obama, I think, actually. Rick Warren, the big mega church pastor who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. Yeah, we complained about that. And we actually complained and won a lawsuit over the National Day of Prayer, which was then overturned on standing. But the National Day of Prayer is the first Thursday of every May. It started in the 50s, and then Reagan made it a fixed date in May. And Congress has required the President of the United States to proclaim a day of prayer once a year. So we sued over that, and we won over that. In the court, the judge says this is not right. You know, prayer is a private matter. People are free to pray if they want to, but our government should not be doing that. But the government appealed. This was Obama's administration, by the way, appealed our victory to Chicago, and the Chicago appeals court did not say we were wrong. They didn't say it's right for the president to proclaim prayer. They just said we didn't have the standing to take the lawsuit. So a lot of times the courts can duck an issue by denying you the right to even get into court. So our victory on the merits was not overturned. The court decision that we have was not overturned, so it's a good one. So we kind of were asking the court, well then if we don't have the right to sue over this, who does? And one of the justices on the court said, well, probably the only person who would have the right to sue would be the president himself, because Congress is telling him to pray. So, I mean, that was a way of ducking it. Same thing happened with Michael Newdow. You all know Michael Newdow. He's a real hero of the First Amendment with the Pledge of Allegiance, which he won here in California, and he won strong. And again, the U.S. Supreme Court did not overturn that. They just simply said he didn't have the standing. You know that story, don't you? They came up with this lame excuse that it's not even a legal principle at all, and in California was not even an issue. The excuse was that, well, Michael Newdow is not the custodial parent of the child, therefore did not have the standing to take the lawsuit. So we win most of our cases, which is good, but the ones that we lose probably about 40%, I think. The ones that we lose, most of them we lose not on the merits, but we lose on standing to sue, to get into court. We won a case back in the early 2000s against George Bush on the faith-based initiative. Strong decision, and then the appeals court even agreed with us, with some conservative judges, that Bush's faith-based initiative was unconstitutional. But the Supreme Court then, the government appealed standing, and the Supreme Court took it and 5-4 ruled against us, again, not on the merits. And in fact, one of the justices in the Supreme Court even said that what Bush was doing might very well be unconstitutional, but we didn't have the standing to sue. There's that out. And the argument they made has a little bit of merit to it. It's kind of weird, but they said since Congress did not actually specifically allocate funds for that exact purpose to the executive branch, that the executive branch was taking discretionary funds to do the faith-based initiative rather than a line appropriation, then the nexus was broken between us taxpayers and to that policy. So we didn't have the right to actually take the lawsuit. If Congress had said, we're going to allocate this money for faith-based, and then we could go after it. And so sometimes you can find that. Maybe in California or in Arizona somewhere, there might be a legislative action that actually is saying, here's money to preach religion in the prisons or something. Then you would have that taxpayer standing. So, over here's another question, right?
Where does FFRF leave off, or whatever you want to call it, and AU begin? American for separation of the universe, Americans for separation of the church and state.
Yeah. Well, so it doesn't break off and begin. We overlap a lot. Americans United has a broader agenda, and ours fits right in with theirs as well. Same thing with the ACLU. We work with them, and sometimes we take lawsuits with Americans United, and with Barry Lynn, and now with Rachel Lazar, who's taking. In fact, Rachel Lazar spoke at our convention last month in Madison, and we gave her an award. And Steve Benson drew a caricature of her, the cartoonist, and there's a picture in our paper of her getting it. So we often will cooperate, and all the attorneys in all these groups, it's FFRF, Americans United, Center for Inquiry, American Atheists, American Humanists have a strong legal department. So all the attorneys in all these free thought state church groups, we all know each other, and they're conferencing and talking. And just this week, we filed a brief with CFI in Montana over religion in the public schools. So, and sometimes we'll co-file a brief with Americans United or others. And in Ohio, about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, for the first time, the ACLU, FFRF, and Americans United, all three of us filed a lawsuit together. And we won that. It was a Jesus painting in a public high school. And it was like important historical people, and there was a painting of Jesus. And so we complained. It wasn't just us complaining. It's not like we're roaming the country. It was people in the community who saw that who were complaining. And so the principal said, well, that's been up there for so long. That picture's not coming down without a court order. So, so we did win that. And it was historic in that the three groups, we worked together on it and shared resources. And so the principal and the mayor of the town there, it was I forget the exact town, Southern Ohio, they were able to save face, and that's fine with us. They were able to save face because the insurance companies said on the second round on the appeal, they were not going to pay for it anymore. And since the insurance company wasn't going to pay for it, the school district was going to have to then pay for it. And so the superintendent said, well, times are tough, we can't afford this, so don't blame me. I mean, I'd like to keep fighting for Jesus, but we're going to drop this case. So that's great. It gives them a chance to save face because they have to get reelected in that town, right? They don't want to be the principal who kicked Jesus out of the schools. And then often, if there's a big Supreme Court case, often a lot of us will write these amicus briefs, which are called friend of the court briefs. And sometimes all the attorneys from all the different groups will conference and say, okay, this is an important Supreme Court case, and let's submit these briefs, but let's not overlap and step on each other's toes. How about if your organization takes standing, and your organization takes history, and your organization takes this legal precedent that they're using in their argument. So that way we can hit them from different angles on the same issue and coordinate. So it's the organizations are technically competitive, but not really. There's a lot of people who join all of them. So it's not like FFRF members are like a church. You can only join. A lot of people join some of you probably join all the groups because you want to get the literature from them all because it's all good stuff. So there's a very collegial kind of cooperation that goes on. And, of course, our attorneys love this work. Constitutional work, making a real difference on these issues. Back here? Yeah.
Yeah, lifetime member, probably that.
All right, is that your pin you have on there? There you go.
Two questions if you have time. One is, for a while you had a spin-off organization for doing good work around the world. And just explain what happened to that and why that was old for a while.
Well, it's on purpose.
Right.
Was that the end of the question?
Well, no, so I wanted to hear about that. And the second thing was the black collar reports that you have in every free month. It seems, I just am fascinated that you're able to find all of that information across. What kind of staffing does it take to do that report every month?
Well, that's all documented too. You can look up all this. It's not like we're making it up.
Where do you find all of that information?
So Annie Laurie, way back in the 80s, when Free Thought Today first came out, she started hearing from people around the country saying, this is happening, you won't believe this. And each case looks kind of isolated if you live in some town somewhere in Nebraska. But then we kept getting a lot of them. So Annie Laurie wrote the first nonfiction book about clergy who sexually abused children back in 1987 or 8 or 89 maybe, called Betrayal of Trust. So she was following this a lot, keeping clippings in a huge file drawer of clippings from all over the country. And now now that she and I are co-presidents, we hire staff, and our former editor, Bill Dunn, who used to work for the Capital Times, he is now semi-retired and he works from home. So that's his one job. So Bill Dunn, you'll see his name on it, compiled by Bill Dunn. So he does the research, and he gets the clips and he finds the stories, and he compiles all those, and he can't put them all in. There's not enough room to put them all in. And that's the one part of the paper that I proof every month. PJ, our editor, gives it to me because there's always some little mistake in there. So if you ever read Black Collar Crimes, it's pretty clean. Bill's really good at it, but I go through the whole thing. Annie Lloyd doesn't want to read through those anymore. But what a lot of people do is they look for their state to see if somebody in their area that they know. And we got, over the years, over the decades, so many files, just so many. Down in the basement, we had these filing cabinets, just all these clips. We didn't know what to do with them. They're historical stuff. So the Kinsey Institute took them. We shipped all these crates of these clippings to the Kinsey. They wanted the history of that kind of thing that was happening. So I don't know what they're going to do with them, but they wanted them. And what was your other question? Oh, so it's called non-belief relief. So non-belief relief. It's what it's called. So the 990 form is a form that every nonprofit in the country has to file. Some of you work for nonprofits, and you know what I mean. If you have a nonprofit like FFRF or any other, you have to account to the government for it, and you fill out this form 990. Every penny that comes in, where it comes in from, every penny that's spent, what it's spent on, who are your board members, and all that kind of stuff. So we are accountable. The bargain we strike with the IRS to be tax exempt, so that when you write a donation check to us or any other nonprofit, you can deduct that from your taxes. The bargain we strike is that we are accountable to the public. So anybody can look at our 990s. You can go right now and look online at our 990 form, which is part of the reason why we have the 4-star charity navigator. And you can actually look at it, all the money that comes in, what it's spent on. Churches don't have to do that. Churches are just nonprofits as well. Churches are religious 501c3s. We are an educational 501c3, and there's others. There's scientific, there's arts, there's museum. I forget how many there are, but so churches are a religious 501c3, and they don't have to file 990s. They're very time-consuming, and they're expensive. We have to hire our accountant every year to come in and do this for us. It's a big thing, and we don't think it's fair. So that we would have to do all this, and they don't. In fact, it becomes like a big black hole, because nobody knows what money's going into these churches. And if the government had known, for example, what Jim Jones was doing with his money, remember that Jim Jones tragedy? Buying the weapons and doing all this stuff and the property in South America. If the government had some way of seeing what the money's coming in, what's it being spent on, maybe that tragedy could have been averted. Who knows? But so no one knows. No church has to explain to anybody about their finances. We do. So we think that was unfair, and we thought, well, then we should challenge this discrimination, because FFRF is dutifully doing this, and churches don't. But the only way to get standing to challenge it, you can't just say, I don't like this, so we're going to sue. The only way to get standing is to have injury. And so you show, I've been injured by the government in some way. And the only way to do that would be to not file the 990 and then get penalized and lose your tax exemption. And then you could go to court and say, see, I was injured. Now I can take this lawsuit. Well, we didn't want to jeopardize FFRF's nonprofit standing. So, and we've always wanted to do this anyway, so it's not a pretext, but we've always wanted to do this. We started a separate related group called Non-Belief Relief, with a little bit of board overlap, but a totally different group. Non-Belief Relief, which is a charity to help, for non-believers to help with mostly disaster relief. And so for 3 or 4 years, we ran Non-Belief Relief, and FFRF was the member of it that funded it. But surprisingly, people were giving to it. People were actually donating to Non-Belief Relief because they thought, this is great, we can help. And part of our mission, most of it was disaster relief, like the hurricanes that hit Georgia and Texas and those in Puerto Rico. But some of it was for helping victims of persecution, atheists who needed to get out of Jordan or out of Pakistan or something. So that was part of non-belief relief. And when we became a nonprofit, 501c3, we told the IRS, we're not going to file a 990 form. We're not going to do that. And we want you to know we're not filing a 990 because churches don't have to, but we do. So it took 3 years of us not filing the 990 form for the IRS to finally come back at us and revoke our tax exemption, which was, yes. I mean, how happy would you be that the IRS revokes? So then that means we are injured. Finally, it took a long time to do. In the meantime, we were doing a lot of good. And so we filed a lawsuit, and in the lawsuit we were able to show we're a legitimate charity, and we were able to show all the money that was raised and how money that was spent to put in, and some of you contributed to that. So we are in court on that issue now, and that's why non-belief relief it isn't functioning right now. And during the course of the lawsuit, we cannot legitimately ask for funds anymore. So we have to be on hold until we either win or lose this thing. We could lose and still go back into business, or we could win and go back in business. So the relief would be, in the law, you ask for relief. What is the solution, basically? Would be either that churches will have to, if we win, churches will have to file a 990 form, or nobody does. Either way. So.
Churches would love that.
Well, okay. So, and that's kind of what happened with our housing allowance thing too, which was also overturned on standing, which is really frustrating. So before you go to court, if you're thinking of going to court, you have to be really, really strong on standing and on plaintiffs and all the ducks in a row. And even then, you don't know what a judge is going to do. They're going to just... the judge came up with a really weird argument about the chaplain case, where I was denied the right to open Congress with a secular invocation. And after dismissing the lower court's decision, which we all thought was irrational, and the higher court said, yep, it was, they just came up with something else, saying, well, we owe deference to Congress, and Congress is different, and so Congress can make their own rules, so they can go ahead and do that. So that was the argument, basically. Not really on the merits at all, but so that's a long answer to your short question. Yeah, you have one.
Back to Christianity on public property. What do you think the Supreme Court allowance of that
Bladensburg.
cross, that didn't go well for us?
No, it didn't. That was an American Humanist case, and they were right about it. It's a Christian cross, and all sorts of even Christian and religious groups and Jewish groups agreed with us. It's a Christian cross on public property. But the Supreme Court came up with this argument that, not all of them, but they came up with this argument that it's been there so long that it's lost its religious significance. So nobody looks at that as a religious symbol anymore. Well, so, I mean, if I were still a Christian minister, I'd be insulted. What? The preeminent symbol of my religion is not religious anymore. It's just a, you know. So we had a case in Pennsylvania that we were winning. Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, which is over on the east side of the state, had a big Christian cross on their county seal, right in the middle, with this other stuff around it. So we won that, and it was a strong case because Christianity was preeminent. And then it went to the appeals court, and the appeals court waited for Bladensburg. They wanted to know what the Supreme Court would say about Bladensburg before they ruled. So after Bladensburg came down, then the appeals court said, okay, we're going to allow the Christian cross in Lehigh County to stay. So we had a strong victory, but now... So it's weird because what the Supreme Court is saying is that those crosses are not religious anymore. That's not a Christian symbol. Well, tell that to the Christians in town who were celebrating at the victory, right? Why are they celebrating the fact that the court just told them that your symbol is meaningless? And yet they are. So obviously we all know the game that's being played here. So We could have appealed that, but we thought we'll be appealing to the same Supreme Court that ruled in Bladensburg. So times are bad right now for Establishment Clause law. Things are not good. There are cases that we've taken in the past that we would not take today. Here in California, Santa Clara, there was a cross on public property in Santa Clara, right by the airport there. And we won that, and they had to move it, and they moved it over to a Catholic college, which is appropriate. That's where it should be. It should be on that religious property. If that issue had come to us today, we wouldn't take it, because we would know that the Supreme Court now is sending signals that you can't. We would have to tell the city of Santa Clara, that's not a religious symbol, people. Isn't that weird? I mean, what kind of logic is that?
Maybe we should go tag the crosses or whatever with Hail Satan or something.
Yeah, well, or hang an atheist banner across the Bladensburg cross, right? If it really isn't religious, we could do. It's just some structure in the city that we can use. So things are not good. Obviously, with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, Roberts and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Now there's this huge move. So it's going to have to be the next generation or 2 generations from now that are going to have to come back when the court does change. But it keeps us busy. It gives us something to do, doesn't it? I mean, there's other cases we can't take. School cases are still strong, by the way. Religion in the schools, we can still take those. So it's the symbolic ones that are getting tougher to take.
We need to pray that Ruth Bader stays alive.
That I'll pray for.
Oh. Kathy has a question.
Yeah, do you have any updates on the Parkersburg, West Virginia, the city council having prayer?
No.
That meeting? You were taking that on, I don't know.
Yeah. We did have a victory this week, though, in Kentucky. A member of ours wanted to put the license plate, "I'm God," on the license plate. And we just got notice from the appeals court, that that's okay. This government cannot be in the position of censoring free speech. And the government was arguing that, well, those license plates are really government speech, right? The government can regulate them. And yet people are putting all sorts of stuff. There's all these pro-religious license plates on them. So if it really was government speech, those shouldn't be on there either. Right? So anyway, so we just got that notice of victory in that. So who knows if they're going to appeal to the Supreme Court on a license plate. Another question? Question way in the back there? Yeah?
I know that you do a lot of letters, like you said, to the school, and that's actually how I got involved with FFRF. You guys wrote a letter on behalf of my son. But even after the school stopped promoting the church event, he still went through a lot of bullying. He got paper Bibles put on his chair, actually got death threats to his face. And the school considered that religious freedom and not necessarily bullying, because my son had said that he didn't. All he said actually was that he didn't believe that the Bible was proof of God. That was all he said in the middle of a theological discussion in shop class, that somebody asked him a question. He didn't bring it up, he just happened to say that. And years later, it's been 2 years, he's now a freshman in high school at a different school, and he still has pushback. But the school never defended him or really considered that bullying, because they felt like they were Christians telling him he was wrong.
That was their free speech, not the schools saying it.
I get the letter part of it, which was a success. They stopped promoting the thing, but how do you push back against the school in that instance?
So we have had some success. Andrew Seidel had the kids were actually being physically bullied. The girls, they were pushing her head against the fence and stuff. It was really pretty bad. And so a letter from us prompted the school to send out a memo then to all the teachers and the principals saying, this can't happen. We have to respect all sides, all points of view. So it's cases like this are fact specific. So it's not nice to hurt somebody's feelings, but it's free speech. If students want to get on the schoolyard and hurt each other's feelings, that's free speech. Teachers can discourage that, but I don't know. We could ask the school if they would come up with a policy to the teachers and the principal to say, look, this is all points of view are welcome here, and then we should encourage other students to be respectful, express your view. I don't know if your school has a dress code. Can they wear Christian T-shirts to school or not? Or could your son wear an atheist T-shirt to school?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't asked that question. He
Uh.
asked me to wear my out of the closet atheist hat though the next time I put it.
Ah.
Are you sure you want me to do that?
So it sounds like he's going to be fine. He's got a strong...
He's there. I just, at the time after it happened, I wasn't really sure how to address it, and he was terrified of Mama Bear tearing into the school office again. So there's a lot of times he tells me things when it's too late for me to react.
So my son has 3 daughters. Well, I have to say it's 2 daughters now and 1 son. Mika just became Lucas as an 11-year-old, which I think is pretty amazing for an 11-year-old to make that kind of a switch. Luckily, it's hard to switch from granddaughter to grandson. But 2 years ago was in the 5th grade, and they were making the teacher was making the students stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. And Mika at the time was her name. With no prompting from us or from anybody, just said, I don't have to stand for this. And the teacher said, yes, you do. You're in the class with everybody. And she said, no, I don't. We didn't know this was going on. We would have encouraged it, but we had no idea. And so one of our attorneys wrote a letter to the school saying the students don't have to stand. They have free speech rights. So then the next week, Mika said that the principal came into this classroom and was talking to the teacher to the side, and they were looking over at her. And ever since then, she didn't have to stand. So the teacher was informed. Sometimes teachers just don't know the law. You would think when somebody gets a job in government, shouldn't they be told about the Constitution? By the way, you can't do these things.
It's a gym next door, there's weights and things.
Ah.
You want to transition to a little music?
I could. I don't think I can sing, though, but the mic won't get over there. But I could do, you guys know Vatican Rag?
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
And it is somewhat esoteric, but I'm afraid of how things are going in this country right now, given the current mood. Obvious push to put religion in our lives even more than in the past. What could you say that gives us hope? You know, it's a scary proposition.
Well, I'm an optimist, so I think we're going through, what would you call it? What do you say in the stock market, you know? Yeah. So, like, if you look at, the stock market might be a good analogy. If you look through history, it goes up and it goes down, and it goes up and it goes down, and you go, oh, and when it goes up, you're happy.
Cycles.
And so, but if you watch it over a long time, look what's happening. It's still going up and down, right? But what's happening in the big picture?
It's trending upward.
The progressive gains that we've made over the last century or two, women voting, birth control, creationism in the schools, that's out. Gay marriage and gay rights. Historically, we have been winning these fights in the culture, and we are winning now. And our population is much less religious now. It's the fastest growing religion right now in the U.S. is non-religion. So as far as the culture goes and demographically, we are actually winning. But in the courts, they are old school. They haven't caught up with it yet. So almost impossible to imagine that we would go back and take the vote away from women. There's probably a few people who would do that, but most of us, that's just unthinkable, isn't it? That a woman would not be able to participate in her own democracy. So those are past battles that have been won. Prayer in the school is unconstitutional, and on and on. So the religious right, I think, is losing, and they are losing and losing and losing, and they keep losing, and they hate it. So that makes them, I think, more dangerous in the short run. They're very, very dangerous right now. I think it's kind of like, this may not be a great analogy, but it's like a wounded animal out in the forest that's dying, and it knows it's dying, and it wants to take everything it can down with it while it's dying. Because it is. It's actually, basically, we're starting to turn into Europe. Europe, after all those centuries of religious fights, it's pretty secular now. And religion is free and open, but it's pretty much, and over in England, they're mystified that this is a big issue for us, because it's no big deal over there. So I think we're going to have some really bad downturns on these issues, but it's temporary. I mean, temporary in the sense of decades. So those justices won't be there forever, and sometimes even they are influenced by public opinion. Look what happened on the public opinion on gay rights over just 3 or 4 decades, right? Remember how horrible it was? It's still bad, but look at the progress that's been made, and you can see a societal switch like within one generation. Smoking, for example, remember? And now look at how suddenly smoking has flipped. How long did it take for that to flip? It took something like that, yeah, just a couple decades. So we're in a downturn right now, and my attitude is meaning and purpose in life come from solving problems. If there were no problems to solve, we would have meaningless lives. I mean, heaven would be ultimate meaninglessness. It would just be no challenges, no problems. And living organisms that we are, we're built to be solving problems all the time, or whatever those problems are. So if meaning in life comes from solving problems, we're going to have a very meaningful next couple of decades. And it gives us something to do. And in fact, groups like ours grow. Into 2016, our group had a big jump of members who grew. Because they're scared and they want to do something. They want to fight back. They want to make a difference. So we roll with the punches. We've lost lawsuits, and it's painful when that happens. But it's just a sign of what country we live in. And maybe there's always going to be echoes. I mean, we had a civil war, so slavery now is out, and yet we're still fighting with civil rights. We're still having these ripples of the long term. So don't be discouraged.